Hello, friend. My name is Paul. I am an individual who has dedifferentiated chondrosarcoma, and I'm guessing that you are watching this. There aren't a lot of people who have that, or it's not very common in general. So I'm guessing that if you're watching this, you either have experienced or are experiencing that same diagnosis, or perhaps you're a family member of somebody who has that diagnosis, or loved one, or maybe even a physician or somebody who has a research interest in helping people with this kind of a diagnosis. So I'm going to tell you my story, and my hope is that it will be somewhat encouraging. If nothing else, there's another face of somebody who has dedifferentiated chondrosarcoma. When I was diagnosed over a year ago, which is good, right? Over a year ago, still here. And, everything I could find in literature wasn't very positive. In fact, they kept using the word dismal diagnosis. And it's very serious, obviously. But I couldn't find a person on the internet even who had it. And maybe there's others out there I just didn't see. But it seemed like a lot of the videos and things were from cancer treatment centers, and they had chondrosarcomas, perhaps, but not necessarily the differentiated chondrosarcomas. As you know, it's the bone cancer is not the most common cancer, and then chondrosarcoma is not the most common bone cancer, and then out of those, about 10% of those chondrosarcomas are dedifferentiated chondrosarcomas. So I can assure you this isn't a video that will be posted for lots of hits, but I just thought it was the right thing to do, and give you a face of somebody else who's had some experience with it. And it may sound kind of, I'm going to tell you how I got diagnosed and things, and it's not necessarily a positive part, but hang in there, because at the end, I'm going to share some things that have been really positive and I think have been helpful. Um, so it was today is the last few days of February in 2023, and so it was fall of 2021. I was remodeling a house with my wife, and every time I got up and down, my knee kind of hurt, and it hurt a little more. And it happens. I had a knee surgery, a scope job on the other knee, and you kind of just think it's going to go away. Take this or that, or kind of take it easy on it. And it didn't go away. It got worse and worse and worse. And so finally, I went into an orthopedic doctor who did an x-ray and came back. And as I told my wife, goodness, this guy almost seemed giddy that he found something out of the ordinary on his x-ray that day. You've got a tumor in your femur. And he said, but he seems like he's real casual about it. I'm going, well, that's awful, and he's like, well, it's not necessarily malignant. And so, in fact, he's going, this quality and that quality, he kind of trying to be positive about it, makes it look like it's not the malignant kind. And so, he says, but it does look like this, that tumor has actually maybe caused a bit of a fracture on your bone already. So don't put a lot of weight on that. And I've been, of course, limping around on it for weeks. And, so we went and got a walker, so hopefully I could take some more weight off it that very day. And when we got home that night, I was trying to go up the steps, not putting weight on it, and I ended up kind of stumbling a bit, and my femur broke, to be honest with you. And so that was very painful. And so I went to the doctor, and the orthopedic people a day later or so were able to use some metal pieces and sort of put things back together. And they did a beautiful job. My leg healed beautifully and felt okay. And of course, I didn't have a diagnosis yet of what kind, and they'd send biopsy samples after that surgery out to various places to have it tested. And I'm guessing if you're watching this and have a similar diagnosis, you had a similar experience where you're hoping it's not X, but it ends up being X. And then you think, well, okay, at least, so for example, it was, hopefully not malignant. Well, it is malignant. And you hope, well, at least out all the cancers, maybe it's a curable kind. And they're like, well, we don't really have a curative kind of plan for this. And it's so rare, there's not a lot of tests done. And and then out of all the kinds of chondros, it's, dedifferentiated. So it just seemed like it was worse news and worse news and worse news. And it was. And so, I was kind of getting things in order, thinking, I'm not going to be around even a year by some of the stuff I read or as I understood it. But I need to say too, I am not a medical doctor, and I am not giving anyone advice. Don't take my advice here. I just want to share my story, and because I think it's somewhat encouraging. It maybe gives somebody an idea of a conversation to have with their doctors, or I don't know. But anyway, so I was able. We live in the upper Midwest, and so I was able to visit the Mayo Clinic, and they basically said because my leg is bad to have a bone break that there's a tumor in it because it spreads apparently the cancer cells more rapidly, and but nonetheless they thought it would be better if I forfeited my leg, femur down. And so that's what I did, and it wasn't. I think that's the thing that I don't know, scares other people like family members and the most. It's like, oh my gosh, that's terrible. I gotta tell you, it's not. If it's me, or for me anyway, it wasn't that horrific. You start to look at that leg with that tumor that's got an incurable cancer in it, and it starts to look like the enemy. To me, it did. It was like, that's got to go, and I'll learn how to get around and be mobile in a wheelchair or crutches or prosthetic or whatever. And so they did the surgery, and I had some really wonderful doctors. And and that was okay. I healed, I cured, that was fine. But I no sooner got that done, and they were saying, oh yeah, we need to go back and look at those nodules that were on your lungs. And apparently, if you have again, I'm not a doctor, but this is my understanding. If you have dedifferentiated chondrosarcoma and they can remove it, that's sort of the standard practice, is remove it and hope it doesn't spread, right? If it pops up somewhere else, remove it and hope it doesn't spread. And so stopping it from metastasizing, a person can live, yeah, I mean, a decent amount of time. I mean, maybe I see 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, but if it doesn't spread, that's great, but it tends to be pretty aggressive and tends to spread. But I know there are exceptions. So anyway, right away I get my leg surgery, to the amputation, and there were nodules in my lungs, which of course turned into be cancer cells. And so I almost immediately went to, from one surgery to now treating cancer cells in my lungs. And I think as I've read, it can spread other places, but the lungs tend to be a favorite secondary site. And I was told because there's a lot of blood flow there, and that kind of feeds the cancers and such. So, um, anyway, and again, not a medical doctor, not giving any advice, but for me, um, we decided to try a chemo treatment, even though the chemo treatments say we're not really designed to treat chondrosarcomas, and there's nothing really proven to be exceptionally effective. But you try what you can try, and so we did scan, and I had these tumors in my lungs, and so my doctor decided doxorubicin was the thing to try, and I think there's a different name for it if it's an isotope delivery mode, and I don't even know what that means, but I remember that part. So when you first start chemo treatments, they'll ask you to put in a port, and I had never heard of that before. I'd never really known anybody with cancer, or nobody that would talk about that, not a close family member or something, but it's kind of a plastic little thing they stick up here in your upper chest under the skin. And it allows you to have infusions and blood draws and things without having so many pokes in your arm. And so I did a surgery for that. I did a lung biopsy to get, confirmation diagnosis kind of thing on what kind of cancer. That wasn't real a successful process, but I got to tell you, that sounds terrible too, like a lung biopsy. It was a piece of cake. I mean, really, it wasn't nothing to worry about as far as like this awful process or procedure. So um, anyway, so I tried the doxorubicin and whatever the isotope delivery method is called, and I had, they hooked it up to the port, and I had almost an immediate awful reaction to that. High blood pressure, or actually blood pressure dropped, I believe. Bright red face, ears ringing, just all sorts of things. And maybe that was some of that. Then there's anxiety on my part, I don't know, but they decided that was a bad thing for me to take. And so they kind of quick gave me some liquids, fluids, Benadryl, the whole works until that stopped. And um, so then I tried, which I guess is pretty rare. Most people I think can tolerate that. I don't know. So then I tried kind of the older delivery method, just a standard infusion of the doxorubicin. And so I went every 2 weeks, I believe, and for 12 weeks. And halfway through, they took another scan, and the tumors in my lungs had shrunk. And so that's pretty amazing. I didn't know that was going to happen. It didn't seem to be expected by a whole lot of people, but they thought they'd try it. And by, grace of God, I was a person who it helped. And so, um, really thankful for that. And so I did that for 12 weeks. That particular medication, though, they don't like to keep you on more than 12 weeks because it starts to cause some heart problems potentially and some other organ issues. And so 12 weeks, they go, okay, you're kind of done, which is a bummer because it's working, right? And as far as side effects, there were some side effects, but all, sleepiness and potential nausea, stuff like that. But the nausea even they've got medicines that controlled that for me really well. That just wasn't a big factor. Um, so anyway, I was done with it for 12 weeks and then took a 6-week break, did another scan. And of course, the tumors in my lungs were growing back. And so I had to try something else or kind of, I'm on a really short game at that point. And so they're now, I've been put on the brand name of what I'm on, not a commercial for it, but is called Votrient. And that's a daily type chemotherapy pill. So each pill is like 200 milligrams. So you try to kind of build up the recommended dosage if you can tolerate it. And so anyway, I did that. And after 6 weeks or so, they tested again and the tumors were shrunk 25%. First time. And so the wonderful thing about this and why I'm hopeful right now is that even though that they don't claim that this is a good treat or the right curative type treatment or a treatment for this kind of cancer, I guess the stuff it is designed to help people with those cancers can stay on this quite a while, months and maybe even years. And so I'm just really thankful right now that those two things worked. And maybe I'm living on some borrowed time. I got some bonus time, I like to say, right? And since the diagnosis for me, I've had, I would say, a year and a half, at least. I've had it that long, and it's been diagnosed 13 months ago. And I feel good, and things are shrinking in my lungs. And I got to learn to kind of be mobile a different way. I've got to, live life, experience life in a wheelchair, and kind of look for those ramps and cut out curbs. And I have a wonderful wife who helps me move my wheelchair around and things. But it's not been the worst thing in the world. It really is not. I can enjoy life. I got to go to kids' weddings, graduations that I didn't know if I'd be here for. So I'm just thankful and um, doing some kind of cool stuff. Reading some kids' books to future grandkids, hopefully, and and maybe I'll get to see them now. I don't know, but I just wanted to send some encouragement, give a face to somebody else who has the dedifferentiated chondrosarcoma, and just maybe I'll record another thing and post it if I have some other thoughts. But I just wanted to post this because it seemed like a good thing to do, and I hope it's helpful to you. And God bless you, my friend.